Hello, or for this episode, I should say aloha and welcome to Meet the Author. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Meet the Author is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer organization, and our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. Please visit us on our website at ifgt.net. That's Institute for Global Transformation, ifgt.net. There's a join button on our main menu. If you'd like to become part of our community of change makers, we invite you to do so. And there's also a donate button if you wish to support our work, including programs like this, and that donate button will take you right to an effortless PayPal screen. This live stream is being recorded and will be published on IFGT's YouTube channel. If you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and also press that little bell icon next to the subscribe button so you're notified whenever we do post new videos such as this one we're recording now. Tonight's program breaks with our usual format in that we respected our guests' wishes to pre-record the conversation, and IFGT's founder and president, Dr. Marianne Miller, joined me during this recording. Our guest that I've been not referring to by name yet, I will now. He goes by Pila, or Pila of Hawaii, aka William Childs, and we'll be discussing his book, The Secrets and Mysteries of Hawaii, A Call to the Soul. William Childs, aka Pila of Hawaii, served with the U.S. Marine Corps in Vietnam. During a near-death combat experience that earned him the Purple Heart, Childs witnessed a vision of our future, which led him to Hawaii. A profound realization came years later when, in his Call to Paradise, he discovered that his near-death experience in Vietnam had occurred on the precise 19.5-degree latitude of his connection to Hawaii, a key known to ancient mathematical sciences as sacred tetrahedral geometry. Scientists and theologians contend that this most ancient of Sanskrit mathematical sciences may indeed hold a master key to Earth's great mysteries. Today, Pila is known for the extraordinary psychic insights of his Akashic life path readings and as a teacher of what he considers to be the second major key, the ancient Hawaiian wisdom, known through the works of Max Freedom Long as Huna. He is also a trainer and master practitioner in the field of neuro-linguistic psychology and an ordained minister. As a result of his metaphysical research and greater understanding into our mysteries, Pila was awarded an honorary master's in life sciences, Order of the Essene. As a non-Hawaiian, he was further honored as a guest speaker for the Year of the Hawaiian by American Hawaii Cruise Lines on both inter-island cruise ships. To date, he's given over 11,000 Akashic readings, including 85 for delegates and employees of the United Nations in both New York and Vienna, Austria. He's one of the few non-Hawaiians to ever perform an official Hawaiian blessing for the opening of a Hawaii state institution. Known fondly throughout the islands as the Pied Piper of Paradise, Pila of Hawaii has captivated audiences internationally with his mystical musical journeys of the mind and the electric response to his authentic Hawaiian chanting. And he performed one of these chants for us during the interview, and he's also made them available for us to make available to our audience and our members, which we will have more information forthcoming in the near future. His book, The Secrets and Mysteries of Hawaii, has enjoyed a 5-star rating for over 2.5 decades and is now available in 9 countries. It has been translated into German, selected for the International Theosophical Research Archive in 2004, along with the new interpretation of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and is also in the University of Hawaii Archive as well as the Hawaii Public Library system. I'll finish with this quote from Pila. In this, our time of greatest change and defining moment in all history, Hawaii is our key to reconnecting to what truly matters. It is the living metaphor of what the human soul seeks. Further, ancient signs indicate it may secretively hold even more for us, indeed, a master key to our entire human puzzle. With that, I invite you to sit back and enjoy the conversation between Pila, Marianne Miller, and myself that was recorded earlier this month. Enjoy. I thought I'd start with a little quote from the book where we say very generically on the mainland, if you know any words of Hawaiian, they're probably the only one most people would know is aloha, and not really understanding what that means. And so from the book, you say, aloha is love. It is light. It is spirit. It is living from our hearts. Alo means to stand in the presence of or to go with. Ha is the breath, the essence of spirit and light, that connection which the life force rides upon. To say aloha is to stand in the presence of the breath, spirit, and light, and to acknowledge and recognize all of this in another. And when I read that, I thought, oh, and the other way that you hear it said these days is namaste. And I just thought that was beautiful and a lovely way to start and kind of set the tone and spirit for meeting and having this conversation. So grateful, thank you. And it's such a pleasure to meet you.
You're doing it much better than I could. I'd like you to just continue and we'll bottle it up and put a label on it. You're perfect. You really got it. Hawaiians are the most abstract of all languages that I've ever known. And the islands themselves, you'll find it out when you really get in tune, is a living metaphor for the planet. It's very abstract. Everything there is symbolic. And now we're finding out in psychology and particularly neurolinguistic programming and some of the subconscious sciences, hypnotism and everything else, that the Hawaiians really knew much more than we do today. And as we uncover things, it verifies all of that. For instance, they knew that the subconscious mind is the great wealth of information and the connection to the higher connection. But what they knew that we still haven't accepted in science today is that if you treat it and understand it like about a 5-year-old child, your unihipili it's called, and befriend your subconscious mind, it'll unfold and flower and take you everywhere you want to go and connect you with everything you want to connect with. In my initiation into the islands, when I came to the islands, I was a survivor from combat and desperately looking for answers and looking to come home, particularly metaphorically, and to find and reclaim my soul. So I had a sincere earnestness about me that the Hawaiians picked up on almost instantly. But my initiation was really interesting. For instance, one of the classes that I was brave enough to give and share a little bit of the aloha spirit as it came to me, as it channeled, which happens anytime you open up and just connect and surrender to that unihipili, that higher self, that greater wealth of information that's connected with all there is. And they even knew a better way of praying instead of bowing your head and begging. It was more of an Eastern philosophy of opening yourself up and being receptive and emptying yourself out so that you could receive something higher. And they had even a greater understanding of that. Is incredible. And as I connected with the islands, I realized that it was, if anything, the prime real estate example on the planet of where East meets West. It is the most isolated landmass also. If you ever want to get in touch and you simply can't with something greater, what I call the platform for all churches, the church of all churches, Hawaii is the wonderful place to do that. Unfortunately, many of the people looking, such as I was, searching deeply, think it's to own that real estate and to move there. And most of them don't get the point in doing that. They find that it's everywhere but where they're looking. And it's kind of like the old metaphor of the master that beckons the Eastern philosophy child to climb the mountain and crawl through the broken glass and struggle and get to that high mountain so that he can understand. And when he gets there, he looks down at the other side of the mountain and it's a perfect road and beautiful and easy. And he says, my God, it's easy. Why didn't I do it that way? And the master says, you got it. Now you can leave and go home. And you got the message, and get on with your life instead of searching for it, instead of desperately hunting for something you don't have. You need to uncover it inside. And my initiation, the one I remember most, when I was first in the Waikoloa Hilton, very large hotel on the Big Island of Hawaii. It's so large, it has its own monorail system and ferry boat system. It's just an incredible resort. And so I decided to give a little sharing, a little moment I wanted to share with tourists for the first time. And I go to an empty room except for one large Hawaiian that I recognized. He was the doorman, very large man. We called him Uncle Donald. And he sat there with his arms crossed. And so I went ahead and gave the class anyway. And I got so involved with it, I ended up chanting at the end with my eyes closed. And I open my eyes, I get emotional, I think about it. And Uncle Donald was sitting there with a tear running down his cheek. He nodded his head and got up and walked out. And from then on, my classes were filled.
Wow.
Yeah. And each initiation was like that from the Hawaiians. They would put me through a little test, never one-on-one, just to see if I knew what I was talking about and if I was on case and on point, and if I was earnest about what I was talking about. To the point that I was even given very sacred gifts, the highest and most powerful of all chants. And at one time, others would just sort of come to me in bits and pieces, and then they would fill into pieces so that I would say them properly and do them properly. And one of my turning points was in New York City at the United Nations, when I had the honor of taking the chant to the United Nations, also in Vienna, Austria. And I wasn't getting through. People were talking in the background and they were being fashionable. So I stopped everything, did the chant, turned around and walked out. And I didn't hear a bit of applause or anything, so I thought I'd completely blown it. And so I turned around, walked back in, and people were walking into the walls and looking around.
Wow.
And saying, what the hell happened? And I knew I'd gotten through. And then from then on, the classes were listened to. And I was able to share the profound secrets, which are always simple. If it's not simple, you haven't gotten to the essence of what you're trying to teach. You're not at the core meaning of it yet. And that's one of the key guidelines of understanding anything Hawaiian. And if you dare to translate a word, and I've been able to do it at 7 different levels of meaning, sometimes because the words are so abstract, it'll always teach you something, as the meaningful experience will. And that's the reason the Little Red Book has been so incredible. It was the little book on the side that wasn't supposed to be the important one. And I wrote it out of joy and a moment of inspiration. And it just flowed off the end of the feather pen, as they say. And it's called The Secrets and Mysteries of Hawaii. It's in probably its 27th or 28th year now, 5-star rating internationally, all by word of mouth. It's never even been spell checked or properly put together. So we just left it like it is because the magic worked. And my publishers, Chicken Soup for the Soul, are still sending the royalty checks. It's very popular in England right now. And someone translated it earnestly, we found out, into German. And we just let them do it. And it's just been absolute magic, the book that could. So somebody out there is getting it, particularly people that are earnestly looking for answers. And they're really getting in touch with Hawaii. And mainly, the main sales come from people getting there and experience something so beautiful they can't put their finger on it. And then they'll pick up the little book and wow, that's it. So what I recommend after that, if you want to know a little bit more about the basics of Hawaiian, is my friend Serge King's work. He's written, Serge Kahili King has raised Hawaiian, he's a PhD, and he's written several books on what's called Huna, the essence or studies of Hawaii. And in that, you'll learn some principles that we call Huna magic. And one of those principles that's always been best if you want to know something, and particularly when I've tried to find out answers, is the principle called assuming the attribute. And what the Hawaiians called it was playing dress up. If you put on the gown and put on the makeup and put on the little stage play and start acting the part a little bit, it'll come to you. And you'll get more in tune to it. And that's kind of what happened to me. And the great profound little joke from above that came to me was my name. It initially came to me when I was chanting and feeling very moved. I walked on the narrow path clear back into what's called Waipio Valley. It's this gigantic valley on the big island of Hawaii. You're nodding your head, you've all been there, good. It's really worth the trip. Well, I get all the way back there, several miles through the jungle, and you're on this very narrow path that's hanging off a cliff. It's very similar to the Nepali coast on Kauai. And they're both profound experiences if you ever want to go on the metaphorical journey of all paths, of climbing all mountains. You'll get the point there. You'll understand deeper at one of those points. So I get all the way into the valley and it's completely socked in fog. And I was so upset. I came there to see the beauty and witness all of it. And there it is, complete, blanked out. So I felt moved to chant. And I walked out on this point. Still, forgive me, I didn't think I'd be so emotional after all these. And I was moved. And I called out to God. to make or to essence, to be. In this timbre that I call the first interrupted tone. If you wanted a better interpretation of the Bible, the Hawaiians have many passages that will get you to a meaning. And their explanation of a certain passage that led men astray more than anything else on this earth and caused too many churches and too many wars is a passage called, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." And Hawaiians would understand that is, in the beginning was the sound, and the sound was with God, and the sound was God. And that truly is the timbre of the chant, that is the timbre of all music. Every violin string that has ever released a note, every guitar string, ukulele that has ever played on the back porch next to a campfire, is that sound being released. And I believe that's why the Hawaiian chant affects the neurology so powerfully when you're in a receptive mood. It can just strip everything away and listen and feel. And so I was moved. I uttered this chant that had been given to me by a very special person I will tell you about in a minute. And the entire valley just started emptying out all the clouds. And this was a twofold blessing and a curse, because I was standing there with my arms out and the maili lay around my neck, feeling just the most incredible spiritual moment, and the sun shone right on my face. And a born-again Christian that was in our group behind us came up, and he was horrified. And it looked like I was causing it. Well, the big joke about it was I came back much later on my own and discovered it's a natural phenomenon and a wind current. And I just happened to be perfectly aligned at that moment, which will put your ego in the right place and put you in the right connection and the right understanding of what you're to be, because that's one of the understandings of deeper huna in being in tune with light. The Hawaiians understand that life is profound coincidence. It's not accident.
Yeah.
And once you align yourself, things will perfectly happen and perfectly unfold. And the flower will blossom just as you want to, experience its fragrance and so forth. And then I understood other things at that moment. I looked up and I realized that this world of accidents, that just above it, all the strings of the puppet master come together. And if you were to understand it from a far away perspective, you would see that all life is a tapestry. The threads cross, make a picture, and it makes sense. And it all has meaning, and it's all interconnected. And all of that can be found in the chants and the study. Everything that I've ever found to be incredibly enlightening, I can find its essence, its simplicity in something Hawaiian. It's just been incredible. And that chant that was so powerful for me, and I'm not going to do it for you today. I want your people, because you've been given the chance. You now have stewardship of everything that I've written, and it's for your movement, your mission to gather its strength and to share And that's my prayer, is that people would make a donation and you would give them the chance with a greater understanding. What I can add to it for you is how to use them properly. For instance, the one I will do for you today is a little chant we call the ultimate essence of simple attraction. And it's a feminine chant. And the first line in it lifts the eyebrow. The second line in it, interpret it, winks at you. The third line bears its leg for you. And the fourth line attracts you into its. And if you ever wanted to manifest something, play this chant a few times a day. And if your people and your interested students could please make a donation in that regard and download that chant, give to them, it will help expand your mission and what you're doing, and it will work for them. It's an incredibly powerful chant. I want to hear from Marianne.
Well, first, I'm just so grateful to have you here and to share all of your wisdom with everyone who will be listening to the interview up on YouTube. It's wonderful. I really want to thank you for that, Pila. As far as a question, in the book you talk about finding your way home, and you've talked a little bit about that today. But there's so much going on in the world today. Do you want to talk about what we could do to be helpful and help make the world a more peaceful place for everyone? The IFGT talks about the tipping point, and we've been trying to gather some wisdom as to what will that look like? How do we go about helping that? And what's our role in helping with that?
It's a pretty large subject too. Everybody thinks it's ecology, and that's a part of it, but it's not the profound, large, most important part of it that everyone thinks of, because and that's highly arguable. People are going to say, no, we've got to stop polluting and we've got to stop this and that. Yes, but unfortunately, it's in the hands of people that are making too much money at doing otherwise, which is a bad habit. World's not really evil. It's just a bad tangent that people get off onto once they find things a little too tempting in one area. The Hawaiian understanding of what you said was to simply be what you are, try to strip away the complications, and share with those around you. And if you can hear it in every Hawaiian song, particularly one of our dear Hawaiian raised natives, his name was Gabby, and he was the original back porch ukulele player. If you listen to one of his songs, if it doesn't bring a tear to your eye, then you're not ready for the next song, because it is the call home and the call back to the magic and the call back to the simplicity and getting out of the chaos and the trouble and remembering what's important. And the song will hug you, like you gave me at the first part of this to launch this conversation. It's a female thing. I think we should be in a matriarchy right now. I think probably save the world. Your mission having to do with empowering individuality is probably the most critical part and the strongest part in a time of change. I wrote a little book that never went to press. Several of them didn't. It was called The Tidal Wave of Change. And someone jokingly renamed it because it was a satire on the turbulent change ahead and a prediction very accurately of everything that's happening now and more. Dire consequences that before something great happened. And someone renamed it. And so I grabbed it up and put a new cover on it. And we called it The Armageddon Fun Book and Survival Guide. And we decided we we're going to package it with a fifth of scotch and a box of crayons. And see if you could wing it and survive what's ahead, because it's a world of profound change, a white knuckler, as everyone would say. And as Gabby would say, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's only just begun. We've started the dance. And the best, most positive approach to all this, I just received in the mail from England, another person that had the book for years and hadn't read it, and read the little book and got in touch with me. And they were having a profound feeling that they need to go back to the islands right now, because everything is starting to hit the fan in England and Europe. And they're all worried about the Ukraine and World War III, and they have right to be. The best thing you can do is start being all you can where you are now, and lovingly appreciate every day and lovingly share your light with everybody else. Radiate until you draw those to you in love and light. And there's a way to do it. There's a method of doing it. And I think your mission greatly helps in that way of sharing, of empowering the individual. And that's the reason I want to take everything that I've done and share it with you. And it's the small cadres of individuals that are not only going to make it through this change, but are going to radiate and profoundly change everything on the planet. And as a wise man once said, this is in the tidal wave of change, never try to help a falling elephant. So anything large, anything conglomerated toward the end of a time, stay away from it. Don't support it. And devote all of your energy back to the small in the individual, the community, the village, and then network those villages together to do something, but not what has already been established and grown. It's not only so overgrown and overfed in the wrong way, it can't sustain itself any longer, and it's slow and cumbersome. The falling elephant. Okay, and that's where we are right now with the corporations, with what we've created. It's just out of balance, and the pendulum is swung too far in one direction. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just the product of what was, and it's time to evolve that to the next level. That's the nature of change. That's the nature, as the Hawaiians understood, of the seed that becomes the flower, and the flower that opens, the bud that opens into a flower. That's progress in the way that things happen. And when that's finished, it produces more seeds, and sometimes a variation on those seeds. It mutates, it evolves, and that's what we need to do now desperately. We need to become stewards of our planet, but we can only do it as individuals, because everything virtually that is being supported right now at that level doesn't have the purest intent involved behind it. There's this big thing called a dollar sign that's in the way. It's too tempting. I know particularly recently, I've been dealing with people that are worth no less than 7, 8, or 9 figures at the highest level. First ones that came to me were for healings when they couldn't find answers where they were. We had a lot of luck with that in Hawaii. When you get people out on the lava, out of their church, out of their conniving, out of their games, at the end of their rope, at the crossroad of all crossroads, you can open them up to God. You can open them up to a greater healing. And the first thing that happens in Hawaii is stress reduction. The biggest thing that feeds cancer cells is stress. And it's one of the things that we were getting profound remissions just from people showing up, letting their hair down and having a ball and not having 2 balls and 3 balls and 5 balls and hoarding them and competing for them. And, and once we got that point across, through rumor and word of mouth from the remissions we had people at a very high level coming to me for healings. And I said, the healing's not in me, it's in you. And just unadorn yourself, strip things away, and do things sensible. A decent diet, you know, if you're abusing alcohol, if you're off the deep end on some kind of eating habit, you'll know those things. So all things in moderation save one is the Hawaiian understanding of that. And that one is your passion, what truly moves your soul. Just go for that, you know, as we say. You're doing what you need to do, and it could save the planet. So let's get on with it.
This has been more than I hoped for, but had begun to get a sense of before we started the call. And it's just been wonderful. There's tons to unpack, but that's the whole point, is to be able to have this and make it available so that we and others can watch it often, I hope, because there's a lot of magic in your words, and there's a lot of hope and important message in the words. And part of what I heard you describing is also talked about in many circles that deal with consciousness and spirituality, and that's the concept of surrender, which seems to be part of the essence of that Hawaiian spirit you were describing, to let go of everything. And part of that everything is that seeking, that torturous path up the mountain to trying to find something outside yourself. And then so can't thank you enough so far for what you shared. One thing I wanted to explore with you.
Marianne, he radiates. Has he written his book yet?
No, but he shouldn't he?
Get that first book written, because you really picked the right one when you picked Ken. Marianne.
My goodness.
He radiates.
Wow.
This is good. You
Well,
brought up
thank you for that compliment. I totally agree with you that he is definitely the right one.
Okay, now I'm gonna blush and tear up at the same time. Knock it off.
I love it. You brought
Hey,
up
guys.
the most important word right now on the planet, which is misunderstood and not being embraced, and that's called surrender. And it's a feminine word. And let me explain that to you in terms of childbirth. Did you ever hear the one that when Harvey Korman, I think his name was, asked Carol Burnett what it was like to have a baby? Did you ever hear that one?
I haven't heard the story, but
This
I know
is a
the
good
name.
beginning.
Yeah.
And Carol looked at the ceiling and thought for a moment. She said, Harvey, take your upper lip between your thumb and your forefinger and pinch it as hard as you can. And he went, ow, is that what it's like? She said, not quite. Now pull it over your head. So that's what's called surrender, that only a woman knows.
Yeah.
being totally vulnerable,
Right.
turning yourself over to something higher, which is least likely to be done now in a time of change. People don't know how to do it. They don't trust each other, and you shouldn't surrender to each other. Anyway, that's what gets us all in trouble, because everybody's floundering. And as one person put it, we're all kind of just like little ants on an anthill. And something stepped on the anthill. Well, all heck's breaking loose and everything's in chaos, and the ants don't know what's happening because they don't have a clue of the larger picture or the plan or what's really happening in the world right now. So fear rules, and fear prevents surrender. So understanding, meditating, and researching that word in your everyday, and ask a woman who's been through childbirth, and she'll tell you what it's like.
Pila, I want to reciprocate and make a comment about surrender that will tie into something you shared that was a key for IFGT's work toward advancing the tipping point, and then use that to then explore another part of the book that I was just fascinated by. But I'll start just with a little personal story that happened about 6 or 8 hours ago. I was awake, as is unfortunately not uncommon, somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m. And my natural reaction at that time is putting effort into trying to not be awake, to try to go back to sleep. And I think most of us at some point in our lives will have that experience. And what occurred to me through some fortune this last night was to stop trying, to just be with whatever was there. And if my mind was racing, let it race. But whatever I needed to do, the one thing to not do was to try not to be awake or to try to make myself fall asleep. And it worked, and I fell back to sleep. And that was a form of surrender. And it came to me as such at the time. I didn't connect those dots after I woke up, but I remember.
Marianne, he just wrote the first chapter of
Yes.
That's a gold star.
So the notion you mentioned when Marianne asked about the tipping point was that one of the most fundamental critical things was the focus on the individual. And so there is an element of surrender and learning self-compassion and getting to your true essence as an individual. And I think, and I want to put this in the form of a question to you, that serves as the platform to then go and be part of the collective, be part of the community. But until we learn those things and have them solid inside us, at least that's my sense. And my segue to you is the way that, in a sense, what you described in the Hawaiian culture, you discovered was common through many, many cultures, including some of your own heritage. And so I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit more, and your thoughts on this idea of the relationship between the individual and the community or the collective.
You just described the first dawn stripe and a black belt. It's the shaman understanding of preparing yourself and then taking your step forward into sharing yourself and networking with the community. Never do it from ego, never do it from force, always from a point of surrendered, enveloping consciousness. It will carry you forward. It's a little bit of what we discussed from the Eastern philosophy and emptying yourself. It's another way of listening very deeply. And it has to do with just be still and know. Just quiet yourself and quit trying. And take that little notion, if it'll help you. That's the part in the teaching I want you to share with everybody. There's some little things that can help you play dress up when you're coming out to explore and to gain. And that little child in you can really access all of its divine computer and connection to the higher self. The way you described it, like I said, is a brown belt, if not a first-degree black belt in shaman understanding of how to prepare yourself. Simply, utterly. It's not sophisticated little things you do and movements. It's being aware and responsive in that very second, that moment, so that nothing else adorns it, particularly fear. And if a person can learn and practice a little of that every day, it will help you more with your health and your remissions, and you're getting along with anything else. Not only that, you're going to radiate, and people are going to come to you like they do for me sometimes and say, do you have answers for me? And I have to tell them, no, you've got your own. Get on with it.
What a perfect analogy for what's happening to the world and most of its population today, that the fear is that we're collectively being asked to go out in that pitch black jungle that most people thought was something else, at least pre-pandemic. We thought there was some certainty and script and control that we had, and that's been turned on its head, and the fear has resulted. And I think maybe you've just provided what the purpose of this interview is to give such a stark live example from your true past and how you were able to get through that literal darkness in the jungle by just letting go and tuning in. And that's tremendous. And I think we all can learn from that, because in some ways that's part
You
of.
put it better than I did, and that goes in your book.
Yeah, all right. Well,
And there's
one thing I'll have to say
people,
about the book writing, and we may ask
there's 100,000 people that will hear you that will never hear me. So please share that, because that is probably one of the most important things to learn right now.
Yeah.
Because that's for the fear and the change. You haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
It's going to get horrific on the outside.
Yeah. There's another element of the significance of what you learned and then shared from your years in Hawaii. And admittedly, part of that reason those sections of the book caught my attention is that Marianne and I had the opportunity with several others to go to Egypt back in right after Thanksgiving for a couple of weeks. And so in your book, you make numerous connections to many ancient civilizations, including Egypt, but also, so not just the cultural things. And I'd love to hear you talk about those common things that are found in ancient wisdom, ancient cultures, and the indigenous peoples of the earth too, and that just that understanding of living in balance with the planet and each other. But also there's the fascination about the physical places, which are sometimes called power places, which we give a nod to our fantastic friend and member and tour guide, Teresa Weiss, who she and her husband started a company called Power Places, which was the initiation of that whole aspect of the travel industry. So just love to hear some of that, as well as to have you talk about the first teaching. So maybe that's 3 or 4 questions in one, but I'll let you do your magic with that.
People ask me about PowerPoints in Hawaii. Well, is the volcano big enough one for you? That
Right.
pretty well covers them all.
And the ley line connection to the pyramid, though, I mean, that's one that just, kind of blew me away. So
When those were discovered, it was pretty profound about how it was all interconnected and how accurate it was, and how the Hawaiians knew something was out there, and their souls had been there because they're natural nomads, they're natural wanderers. And if I remember right, there was quite a connection with ley lines and other PowerPoints, significant certain perspective points where you could go and feel something a little more powerful. But the utter simplicity of it is, just as it's different energy in the middle of the LA freeway than it is in a nice calm park setting, those are different energy points. And once you strip things away and get quiet in the method that we've discovered, you can tell the difference in where to be. And I don't know if any of your people have dabbled in astrology or dabbled in numerology, but both of those sciences go back much further than anything we have modern. As I've always said, there's a truth in all things that have survived. There's a greater truth and a significance in probably anything that was shared meaningful, if you strip it down. So there's a little bit of, I think it was Gurdjieff, one of the great minds, that said, I've milked many goats or cows, but the butter's all my own. If you will not take it all too seriously and go overboard with one certain thing, as I used to say in the New Age movement, take it all with my favorite crystal, which is a grain of salt.
Huh.
And tongue in cheek, as long as you don't bite your tongue off, because there's some pretty profound things you're going, and pretty convincing things you're going to discover along the way. And some of them will want to sweep you into their magic. But one of them is, I always find out a little bit about astrology, and it keeps you from lumping people into a category or a prejudice, and you can discover a little about their individuality and also a little about the things that aggravate you and that don't quite go with your dynamics.
Right.
And two of the things, probably the most profound thing, was when I was at the height of my intuition and psychic ability, I was doing what the Hawaiians called Akashic readings.
Oh, yeah.
And people would come to me. So if I could, I'd take them out on the lava and say, do you get the point? Or do we have to hit you with lightning? And, you know, what is it you're looking for? And consider everything a omen or a sign, and you're halfway there. I began to open their book and tell them a little deeper sense about them. And the way it came to me, it'll come to other people differently, was in the right corner, far corner of my mind, I could see a book, and I could tell by the thickness of a book how old a soul they were. If they were a young, blossoming first time arounder, or if it seemed like they'd been here for more than one go round. And some people are very old souls, and some of them are very young humans, but they're very old souls. It's metaphorically, it's as though they've been on this planet 4 or 5 lifetimes or more. And that can work for you if you work with it. If you find an old soul and consider these notions I'm telling you. Don't take any of it too seriously. Remember your grain of salt. But consider the notion of some of the things I share with you. And the book would open, and I could tell by the page texture and the typesetting, not the words, but I could tell how old a soul they were and what they had to offer and that sort of thing, and their direction. Well, it turned out an astrologer that was quite renowned, and I'm not allowed to mention their name because it's controversial, in New York City, that was charging tremendous amount for the readings. Said, what you're tuning into is this aspect. And she started coming to several of my classes, and she would say the same thing. And so I allowed her to observe some of the readings with the person's permission. And she said, yes, this is what you're tuning into. And so I pursued the notion of what she thought was an astrological aspect that I had privy to in my psychic ability, and I discovered she was correct. Yeah. So my Akashic readings were basically a person's north node.
Oh, interesting.
And the north node is the path you're walking on. It's your external dynamics and the way you view things. And wow, does that work? If you read some of the people, like I say, read more than one author, because they're all interpreting. As we're saying, they're all looking through their glass, and some of them are looking through a beer glass, but some are looking through a magnifying glass, and they all have a little bit of truth, particularly if they've studied astrology for a while. I retreated to Hawaii for many years and had my lover, Madame Pele, my ups and downs with her until she cut me off. And the way she did that was the volcano was going off so rapidly, so many times. For almost 9 months, we didn't have any beautiful sunsets.
Goodness.
It was completely fogged in, blanketed fog from the spew of the volcano. So finally, I just left Hawaii.
So Pila, one part of the book that I found very interesting, as well as so many other parts of the book, I'd have to have a whole notebook to write. Actually, I did write a whole notebook of notes when I read your book originally. And actually, I don't know if I ever told you the story of how that came about. Matthew and I went over to a bookstore, which we did frequently. And he sort of went his way and I went my way, so we could both decide, what was calling to us. And I was just sort of going down the road, and all of a sudden this little red book just kind of like drew me to it. And so I picked it up and started just reading through it a little bit at the bookstore. And then I said, I think I'll sit down and read this. And so I ended up, of course, needing to buy it because I had to read the whole thing. And then I decided to go to your website and use the contact form and contact you. And I don't know if you remember, but I told you that Matthew and I went to Hawaii and we'd love to meet you. And you, of course, were on a circuit and weren't there that often. And you said, well, just stay in touch. Well, I did this 3 or 4 times, a couple months apart. I kept contacting you and you would say something very nice and end it with just stay in touch. And all of a sudden, then it was time for us to go to Hawaii. Well, we had in the way I operate is when I set my intent, I do it with the knowing it's going to happen. So we went to Oahu and I sent you an email and I said, well, we're actually here in Hawaii. And I just wondered, and we're going to be going to the Big Island on Friday. And I'm just wondering if you might want to get together. And instead of saying, just stay in touch, you said, well, I'll pick you up at the airport. Okay. And the rest is history.
Wonderful.
Part of that.
The most wonderful week there together. You took us it was a trip of a lifetime.
I mean, part of that history was that, as Marianne shared with me, you met her and Matthew every morning at the hotel for the rest of that week and basically gave them your personal tour of these power places, these special spiritual places on the Big Island. It was fascinating. So it's, again, why this conversation. Meeting you is just a huge privilege to be brought into that story that started. I don't know how many years ago this was that you were there, but it's just a delight. There was toward the beginning of the book, you have this kind of a parable about the of the children living in the garden paradise, and everything is going beautifully in life, and the days are filled with the rainbow, and at night there's the mirroring, and then have this just lovely description of how humanity evolves or devolves away with the first inklings of fear and doubt and judgment and all the things that have become layered on us. And I don't know if that is related to the first teaching, but may also relate to this notion I've been thinking about for part of this interview, is the common themes and lessons that are not unique to the Hawaiian culture, that you learned them there, but then were motivated to look at other ancient civilizations and indigenous civilizations and saw that there were very similar aspects and lessons and teachings throughout them. So I'm just, yeah, and what can you share with us about that?
The most general and profound thing that I discovered and milked down from all of my experiences was those peoples, indigenous, that have stayed close to the earth and didn't aspire technologically. I would be bold enough to say that it stayed in feminine, creative, intuitive touch with the earth and the simplicity of it. Share something. And all of those seedlings are very, very common, interconnected, as if they all came from one place. And I've had different cultures agree with me on that. And all of it, I think, leads to the same campfire, and all of it came from the same seed. That's a pretty lofty, abstract statement. But as you travel, you'll find that there's something interconnected and something simple about everything that's profoundly true. And the more simple it is, the more profound it will be for you. It'll strip you away to that thing the Eastern cultures have been looking for when they've been trying to om and chant and empty you out into utter silence so that something can come. And it's because it's not coming from outside.
Yeah. Well, and I think you just hit on the point that I was circling around, which is there's an authenticity suggested, and maybe I'll put this in the form of the question. Would you agree with that because these same truths and profound realizations or truths are found across so much of history and in places that couldn't possibly have shared the information because there was no technology to do that with at the time that those civilizations were coming to this knowledge. And so there is something that maybe serves as proof or authenticity in that. And then, so I guess that's the first question. Would you agree with that? And the second question is there something that strikes you as to why these things are becoming more widely recognized by more of us today?
Part of it is the latter question is because of the interconnected technology and sharing with everybody, but it's so chaotic and mixed up now you can't tell which is pure in it, which is authentic in it. The notion I'd like for everybody to consider, particularly atheists, which I think is just a limited form of comfortable ego, is there's something there. If you can shut up and know, and it's interconnected. And all you have to do is be quiet and it'll come to you, through you. And if you consider that notion, like Marianne said, one I didn't want to skip over, darn it, and it's earlier in her conversation, that is a profound, what I call a female statement of assuming this to be so, then allow it to be so. Assume certain things. It'll work for you that way. It'll bring you knowledge. And that proof along, it's also another banana peel. You can get off on an acid trip and about it if you're not careful. But allow yourself to be guided and try to get out of your ego enough to listen. And you will connect with a layer, and below that is another layer, and below that is another layer that connects us all. And we're now, I think, at the great turning point ever in the writing of our story, that I think you're calling it the tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
Another gentleman from England just said he's calling it the beautiful reset, is what he's calling it. I love those terms.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a beautiful reset. Well, it's not going to, just like if you watch a birth too closely, the afterbirth will scare the hell out of you. But it's not going to be convincingly so beautiful for a while at certain levels as men finalize their games and act them out in fear. But it is change. And that change peels back the onion skins. It opens up the petals. It breaks through the shell. And that's something emits from within. And it's always divine. It's always mathematical, poetic, musical, and beautiful at its core essence. And we're part of it. We're born of it, in the image and likeness of it. There's a little bit of truth in everything that we've discovered that has lasted for a long time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Marianne wanted to ask something. Let me turn this over to her.
Regarding what you just said, Pila, I think it's so important. And I love the term, the Great Reset. One of the things we've been calling it is an age of awakening, where humanity we're coming face to face with some big decisions to make. And I call that an awakening in consciousness of humanity that perhaps we haven't seen in ever. And I think it's so important for all of us individually, collectively. There's no competition toward the light. And if we all can work together.
These things go in your book, dear.
We do need to all work together, because that's what's going to make it happen. We can't think of ourselves as individuals working toward the light. We do work on ourselves individually so we have more to offer. And then we come together and offer it together. And together we will usher in an age of awakening.
That's something to be preached from the highest mountain right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, it should be as a mission and as a uniting statement, as a focus of purpose, that we can finally get a glimpse of how this should be done. You're right on cue. And I'm so glad it's coming from a woman, and a beautiful woman at that.
Now I'm blushing.
I would love to spend the rest of the week doing this, but I know that we may have already pushed our luck with how much time we have with you, but I don't want to end this without seeing if you're still willing and able to perform the chant that you offered earlier.
It's the littlest one. It's a chant of attraction. It's a feminine chant of all attraction for mating, to produce something, to attract something, to enamor something. And it's so simple that I'm hoping people will donate for a copy of it from you for your mission. And it's called Elaka-E, the chant of femininity. And the first line, as I said, lifts an eyebrow. Second line winks its eye at you. Third line bears its thigh at you and attracts you. And the fourth line ropes you in and allows you to propagate it. So if people play this a few times a day when they're trying to manifest something in their lives, when they're trying to make a decision in their lives, it's major. When they're trying to bring something about, it can be helpful to them, just this sound. And I'll do my best for you right now. As I said, the technology does not have it. Now, one of the things we understand about all simple Hawaiian kahuna understanding is to stop and over breathe a few times. And now we're just finding out in science that that activates neurons that are dormant in your normal breathing. It activates receptors that you normally don't use just by over breathing, oxygenating those cells. And stopping and pausing is your pattern interrupt. It knocks off your chaos for a moment. So if you do that, you can find your calm also. So if you'll join with me, just as if it were music, and as I said, I'll do the best I can right now, we're going to attract the magnetic quality of the universe to help and assist you. It's very sexual. So bear with me right now. First thing is to overbreathe a few times and close your eyes and tune in as though you're in Hawaii on the Nepali coast, calling out to heaven, stripping away all the chaos from behind you, all the troubles and concern, all the unpaid bills, all the unfulfilled relationship. Set it all aside and just listen as we attract something higher into manifestation for you, physical reality.
E laka i ka leo, e laka i ka loa'a, e laka i ka vai vai, me ke mahalo nui loa ihi, a pau lilo au he malele. Mahalo.
That was beautiful. Technology be damned. It came across wonderfully. So
My whole head is vibrating.
yeah, I had that experience when I listened to the chants that are on the Journey to Lemuria tracks. I just had no idea what to expect and just was buzzing from head to toe after those played the first time. Yeah, it was remarkable. I hate to let this go. I want to make sure first, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to make sure you shared or that has come to you during this conversation? And both of you, actually, Marianne too, if there's anything else that you wanted to make sure we cover.
Marianne's the most important. I'm fulfilled, so I'm thrilled that it happened this way and we went this far with it. And then I still have a bit of a voice left. So I'm thrilled of talking with you both. You're perfect interactive catalysts, and it helps more than anything to talk to two kind, loving souls like yourself. It's a great trinity here.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way.
Well, I know we could probably go on and on, but I think for now, we'll save it for another time.
Oh, I love that.
That's perfect. Those are my thoughts too. I truly hope that this isn't a one-off, and even if it's not a another recording, we will certainly stay in touch. Thank you so much. Mahalo.
Hello.
That was a delight to see again. It reminded me of how much fun it was to talk with Pila, who has joined us in the audience. And I don't know if he would like to take any questions if there are any, but I really am glad I got another chance to see that and hear the chant again, and a reminder that all of the chants and the guided meditations that Pila has recorded, he's made available to us, and we'll be making them available as well soon. So if anyone has any questions, can let us know. Otherwise,
I have a question.
Diane, please join us.
Thank you. First of all, what a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed Pila, your wisdom, Marianne's and Ken's, and as you said, together, a great trinity. My question to you is, when you say, oh, it's going to get really horrific, and we all know, in light of what Marianne beautifully says about the Great Awakening that's going on, and as a student of astrology, I know that that's going on. And so when you say it's going to get really bad before it gets good, what about free will? What about the idea of the people who are of a conscious act of light coming together and actually generating a tipping point, a shift in the field of consciousness collectively, so that it doesn't have to get that horrific? What do you think about that, Pila?
I'm glad to be with you. I didn't think I would be tonight. And you brought up a most important question of networking and raising the vibration, raising the light, and holding the thought. And it'll cut through the chaos. Anytime you hold a tune and hold it together, and that's the wonderful positive thing about technology today, excuse me. Yes, we should network, and we should hold prayer groups, prayer meetings, and as many people as possible at the same time. When you hold a thought, and it's a positive thought, it will supersede a chaotic or broken thought. It will transcend it. And that's another Hawaiian understanding. And if you can come together, if you got food in the cupboard and communication with your loved ones, you can make it through all of it. It's to the degree that you're dependent upon what's existing now and used to it, is the degree it'll be chaotic for you. If you can just raise your vibration and bring in the light and hold hands, metaphorically, and do it on a regular basis. It's a good idea to schedule yourselves, particularly if there's anything has happened in the news that's very upsetting. And don't go there with that thought. Go there with your joy, with your love, with your holding that positive thought together. And I don't know what you would call it other than prayer groups, but that's what we used to call it in the old days. And everybody should be doing it from here on out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pila.
Yeah, Ken, thank you enough again. Pila, Diane, thank you for the question. Your answer just now, Pila, is reminding me of very similar advice that I've heard over the last couple of weeks from several different sources, which to me kind of means that there's got to be something to that, and that really the essence of moving in the direction of kind of taking the meditation off the pillow and living in that mode more and more in our awake hours, at least, is what is really going to help facilitate this age of awakening. And so that's a practice to begin. And I would guess that your suggestion for people to gather together and commune in this way is a way of strengthening that and facilitating that as well. So it's
yes, hold the positive thought and share the love. And but yes, just hold the positive thought and remind yourself of the love, and do it at the same time, and that will transcend and elevate everything around you. It'll bring it all back together. And don't buy the visual constructs, the things that are going on around you. It's just change. And like I said, I think earlier in the interview, of you watch a birth too closely, particularly a man for the first time, it's horrific. It's physically impossible and it can't be done. But if you realize it's a miracle taking place and it's change, and you hold your positive thought, it'll get you through everything.
yeah, I would have to agree. Well, thank you again. It's been a wonderful surprise that you could join us tonight and get some more of your thoughts for this live stream. Marianne, I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to say, but I want to thank you again for joining me in the conversation and made it special. And it really was an honor to be brought into the story that you have shared that many years of your life with this friendship with Pila. And I really am honored and touched, and it's a delight. So thank you.
You are honored.
Quite welcome. And it's been an honor for me to get to know and stay friends with Pila all these years. He's a remarkable person, a true friend, and it's really my honor.
Thank you, dear. I feel the same. May I give you a final chant?
Oh, that would be wonderful.
How can we say no?
This is the big one, given to me by, I always have to say his full name, the original founder of the Merry Monarch Festival of Hula, Uncle George Lanakila Kekia Iali'i Na Ope. Hawaii's living golden treasure, and he will live forever. God bless that little soul. I call him little because he was a tiny menahuni, but he was a huge, incredible person. And he gave me this most powerful of all Hawaiian chants, is to be opened up, rearranged, put in order, lifted into the light, separate the coarse from the fine in you, cause you to remember who you are. Deep breath and smile now. Picture yourself on that Nepali coast, all troubles aside. This is called I No Hawana. Ke aloha ai no hawana ke akoi, kana heli heli, ia lai ia e te tio hua ka ua koko. E na kina malue talani, malue hoe. E ho ulu mai ana o la ka iko na ka uwa noa. Uwa i kea, me ke mahalo nui loa ihi. God bless you all. And aloha.
Aloha. Wow, that's amazing. Again, it is really something. The power of those chants is just, it's great. Thank you. What a pleasant, wonderful surprise and way to finish this program of Meet the Author. And thank everyone who joined us this evening and those who will be watching this YouTube channel. We've got some great guests coming up in the next couple of months as well. Some folks that Pila actually has put us in touch with that stay tuned, because our programs will continue. And I think you'll find our coming guests to be compelling, fascinating, and very interesting as this evening was as well. So thank you all and take care.